Hello. Welcome to the In Love with Business podcast. This miniseries is titled Chief Sustainability Heroes and is hosted by Professor Paolo Melina and Melina Corvalia-Shore from University College London, School of Management. Throughout this series, we will talk to sustainability leaders from different organizations and sectors to learn about their sustainability journeys. We will ask them about their career paths, the challenges they encountered in implementing complex strategies of sustainable transformation, and what inspired them along the way. We will also ask what advice they would offer to aspiring chief sustainability officers. Enjoy the episode.
Hi everyone, welcome to this new episode. Today we have with us Garrett Quinn, Chief Sustainability Officer at Smurfit Kappa. Smurfit Kappa is one of the leading providers of paper-based packaging solutions in the world. Approximately 47,000 employees and production in over 350 sites across 36 countries. The company is a big company. In 2022, they reported revenue close to 13 billion euros. Garrett first joined Smurfit Kappa in 2000 as part of the Irish Management Graduate Program when he finished the university. And after joining, he basically covered a number of roles in operations across the group. And in 2016 was appointed head of investor relations. Then, after 21 years with the company, he stepped in the role of a chief sustainability officer and was appointed to the group's executive committee in July 2021. Today, he's leading the company's global sustainability strategy and all the initiatives, and is also Smurfit Kappa's representative to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the Consumer Goods Forum. So welcome, Garrett. It's a pleasure to have you in our podcast.
Thanks, Paolo.
So I'm really intrigued by your journey in the company. So from operations to investor relations to sustainability. Can you elaborate a little bit on this journey? How it happened and why today I guess you are happy to be the CSO of the firm.
You should probably start by asking me, am I happy to be the sustainability officer? But let's take that as a given. No, I think, you've summarized it, I guess. So I'm 16 years in operations, so running the plants that make the boxes across the UK, Ireland, and then briefly in France and Argentina. So essentially what those first 16 years meant is I was managing box plants. I was dealing with the customers. I was dealing with the employees. I was dealing with the local communities. I was probably dealing with most stakeholders outside of investors. What I loved about that is you could be dealing with a e-commerce startup who needs 500 boxes, and you could be dealing with the biggest food company in the world, who was bringing you through their certification program, be it on hygiene, sustainability, or best-in-class operations or whatever. So there was just an exposure to absolutely every type of industry, be it pharmaceutical, FMCG, e-commerce, industrial, chemical, and everything in between. In 2015, I should say, we had a new CEO, so a change of CEO. So Tony Smurfit, who's the grandson of the founder, took over. And in 2016, there was a new CFO, Ken Bowles. And so with that change in leadership, there was an opportunity for a new investor relations officer. And Tony and Ken wanted someone with operational background, where typically someone from investor relations will have a financial background. And so that was the opportunity that was given to me. I came over, did it for 5 years, loved every minute of it. Of course, like all things, there's their ups and downs, but 5 really enjoyable years. And during those 5 years, what I saw was sustainability went from probably not on anybody's agenda in the investor world and capital markets to 2018 it started to become a bit more relevant. And then at the advent of COVID, it really just took off. So at a time when we probably expected intuitively that people will focus on, which they did, the balance sheet health of companies, which was critical, and that is what investors looked at. But they also spent, it was almost like the investors working from home did sustainability courses, because we found that investors were much more engaged. So it wasn't just, I see that MSCI and Sustainalytics say that you're highly rated. They would go a little bit further and start saying, can you talk me through your assets in Mexico, or your assets in Brazil, or in Argentina, or in southern Spain? Talk me through kind of how you've approached water risk assessments in those areas. So we found it moving on quite significantly, which is encouraging. We saw our share register also grow with the ESG element of that. And so we just saw opportunity as a company that we were doing okay. We knew we could do better. And so 2 years ago, there was a new role created, which is the CSO. And I've been doing it for 2 years, and I'd say enjoying it, but we'll probably get into it in the coming 20 minutes as to some of the challenges that the role brings, because it's got many aspects of it that should energize a business, but increasingly there are aspects that run the risk of de-energizing the business, such as reporting.
Okay. So as a CSO, Garrett, you are reporting to who in the organization?
So I'm reporting to the CFO, so the Chief Financial Officer, and he was my boss in my previous role. But I continue to work kind of hand in glove with the operations, with the CEO. So it's not. I think it's a great question, and I think there's it's often a question I get asked, which is, where do I think, or where in my experience should CSO?
That's where I was going with the question, I guess.
and I think, Paolo, it really depends on the company. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Like if you work for a company where sustainability is kind of, it's more PR, it's more opportunistic, but you don't think it's real, then there's a good argument to say the CSO should report to the CEO, because you need to drive that culture change, and you need the boss, you need the head of the company to drive that culture change. So that's where I would see kind of the structure might be a bit more obvious, where you need to drive the change. In a company like Smurfit Kappa, where our business, I know there's an element of bias here, but like, we need to, recycling is our core business. We need old boxes to make new boxes, and we've been doing it since the 1930s. So the idea of sustainability, be both operationally and commercially, is ingrained in the company and always has been. So the decision was made actually to move the reporting structure from, so the previous person who was in charge of sustainability used to report to the CEO. And I think the intention really was, we need to move it to the CFO for the reporting that's coming. So let's not lose the good things that we're doing. Let's continue to develop where the opportunity is. But equally, given where the regulations are going and the reporting is going, we need to capitalize on the good reporting practices that exist within the finance department to support that.
Okay. Great. You touched on the challenges that you face in your role, so I would like you to elaborate on that in a moment. But can you just describe for us what the role of a Chief Sustainability Officer is, for those who may not be familiar with the role, just the responsibilities day to day?
Melina, well, I guess the first point, I'm going to sound like a politician here, dodging the question, but it depends on the company again. So it really depends on where you are. And I know it sounds cliched, but in your journey, is sustainability important to your business? Yes or no? And then I think, depending on those kind of high level questions, you'll start to answer your question. But I think, it's in my world, there's some simple things. You should be creating a business case. And I know that sounds a little bit Machiavellian, that, it's not all about making money, but if you can make money and do the right thing, I think you've got a very compelling combination. It's not one or the other, it's both. Um, and I think the second part that a CSO should be doing, and it's something Paolo and I discussed with some other panel members a few weeks ago, is the need to make what is, I believe, is a complex topic, to make it easier to understand. So how do you make certainly as many of the stakeholders that interact with Smurfit Kappa, be they the 47,000 employees, the investors, the customers, the communities where we operate, the customers, the over 64,000 customers that we have, how do we make our sustainability story easier to understand? How do we make any negative impacts we might have easier to understand, and what we're doing about it? And then equally, and most importantly, the positive impacts that we have and what we're doing about it to capitalize on it. And I think we're constantly hit with contradicting noises in society on sustainability, on what should you do, what has the most material impact. And even when it comes to the regulations, we've seen some of the noise around the Green Deal, the taxonomy, what's a green technology, what's not a green technology. And geopolitics started to come in then when you got into the discussing nuclear and gas. And so for all those things, you can see how it brings complexity, and it brings complexity to the public and to society. And I think with that, there's a responsibility on CSOs to how do you make your company's story, relevance, and impact understood by as many people as possible. And so that's about, I guess, communications as well.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like communication then is a key challenge in terms of distilling the complexity. So when it comes to challenges, and this may go back to your point earlier about where companies are on their journey, and so it will likely vary, but what are some of the big challenges facing companies today, and how do you address them in your role as the CSO?
Yeah, I think the reporting is maybe the obvious one, and it's maybe where I do my moaning. And then don't get me wrong, I understand the importance of transparent, assured reporting, and that's where we are today. Like, we have a 152-page sustainability report where the whole report is assured by KPMG. So I see the importance of reporting. I see the importance of independent assurance. But yet I still have a mountain of alphabet soup to get through in the next 3 to 5 years, be it CSRD, CSDDD, ISSB, SEC, all these wonderful acronyms that you have to do. There's the framework stuff like your TCFD and your TNFD, which actually I like, because it's not about you must satisfy these 10 criteria on day one. It's about, this is the framework for what good looks like. And so you should start, and then each year you should progress it. And that, in an ideal world, that to me would be the right way to go. But I stress that is ideal world, because if you did leave it optional, it's highly likely many actors would just say, yeah, I'm very busy, I'll get to it another year. And so you avoid the apples with apples disclosures that the EU is trying to achieve, and that global investors are trying to achieve. So I would say reporting, the primary reason why I think it's a challenge is because it runs the risk of kind of, you become the bad news person within a company. As in, oh, here's the sustainability person who's going to tell me all the new information that I have to collect about things I don't understand, from sources I don't have, about data that is manually collected. It's that kind of it runs the risk of de-energizing the business.
Right.
And sustainability, is the most energizing topic we have to discuss. But in the short to medium term, the focus is very clearly on satisfying an element of compliance and regulation, which is important, but I think is probably a bit over the top. And then I think there's a couple other things which maybe I'll go away from my moaning. what can be a challenge is, there was a great article, a very simple article by the HBR back in 2016 on the business case for sustainability. And, what you as a business, and Smurfit Kappa is a very commercial business, we've been around for a long time and thankfully we've been quite successful, and that didn't happen by accident. So, creating a business case can often be creating a competitive advantage. But what we're learning more and more in sustainability is the need for collaboration. And so how do you marry this kind of, if we do this better than anyone else, we can win business or win investors, and let's not tell anybody. And then on the flip side, you kind of have this need for collaboration to solve, as an industry, we would be quite energy intensive. So when you look at our specific industry, you would say our CEO has a great phrase which says, we don't want to be the best house on a bad street. We want to be the best house on a good street. So we want the street to look good. We want the industry to look good. And then we want to be acknowledged as the best house on that street. Right. So I think trying to marry that competitive advantage aspect of just good business practice, and how do you marry that against, or how do you reconcile that against the growing need for collaboration, which I think that's becoming a big word in recent years. I know one of the big global FMCG brands has a phrase that if you think you can solve it yourself, you're not thinking big enough. So it's pushing this whole idea of collaboration. And then I think it's just one of the other challenges as a global company, as Paolo outlined, is just that difference in approach across different geographies. So we have global targets, global metrics that are tied to our cost of funding. They're tied to our incentives. But yet you can sometimes find local operations, and I won't name the countries, but you can find certain countries will say, well, our local customers don't care about chain of custody certification for paper products. And you go, yeah, but we have a global approach to this. So I appreciate it may not currently be a focus for your country, but you need to work on making that a priority locally and create a business case out of it. So actually, if they understand how chain of custody certification is really good and it drives sustainable forestry, then you should be in a position to actually win business, because if your customers understand its importance, then hopefully you can win business. But lest there be any confusion, you don't have a choice. So you always want to keep the stick until the end, but I guess the governance within our company is there to make sure that if there is ever a time where you feel a customer doesn't ask for it or an investor doesn't prioritize it, well, we've done materiality assessments that say, well, across all our stakeholders, these are important. These are targets that we're delivering on. Let's try and make a business case out of delivering on them. And if there are specific locations where you don't see the business case, please note that in Smurfit Kappa, you don't have a choice. So you need to get on board and deliver them.
And Garrett, I appreciate that the CSO role is different in any organization. That the material topics are different from company to company. I guess, in your opinion, what are the kind of critical skills that a CSO should have? Any kind of CSO. Because I think this could be kind of interesting reflection for our audience. What are the critical skills here?
Yeah, and bearing in mind I'm only 2 years in the job, so I'm not I'm not sitting here and I can give a view. I think as discussed with Melina, it's that communications aspect. I think it's being a good listener. And again, these are all really basic traits. But what do I mean by being a good listener? Have investor meetings where they will talk to you and they might just make a comment on, really like your stock, but I can, it's your energy intensity is, it's a little bit high. And then if you just ask, because sometimes you're afraid to ask, you say, what's your source? And then they give you your source for the energy intensity. And you say, okay, that's not something we would rectify. So by engaging with that investor, or sorry, not rectify, recognize. So by engaging with that investor, we were able to, because there's so many third-party rating sources, you can't stay on top of all of them. But through that investor, we were able to identify that we were incorrectly being represented on our energy intensity. We corrected it, and the investor bought the stock. So it was very black and white. You had this engagement. The engagement highlighted an issue, but by being curious, by not just accepting a comment from an investor, by just saying, well, what's your source, and how material, how important is that particular metric to your investment decision? And they said, well, no, I can't invest in you if you maintain that position. So we engaged with the rating agency to understand how they calculated it, and thankfully we were able to correct their calculations. So I think being curious, being able to listen, being able to communicate. I think ultimately being able to create the business case, which I must admit we haven't cracked, I'd say, perfectly, but with investors it's clearer. With customers, it's becoming clearer. With the softer side, like the people, it's maybe a little bit more challenging because, how can you guarantee by doing the following, you get the best talent, you retain the best people? It's fairly intuitive, but it's hard to say there's your financial payback, where with investors and customers, it is much easier to see that payback. So I think
there are certain topics that, of course, are, I guess, in the agenda of many organizations today. I'm, thinking of decarbonization. I'm thinking of circular economy. I'm thinking of equality, diversity, and inclusion. So, what level of expertise, what level of knowledge, you need to have on these topics if you can, if you wanted to be able to drive change in an organization? Do you need to, have a pretty high level of expertise, or is enough to have to know the basics and basically leverage the expertise of others?
Yeah, God, a good question. I think you need. It's back to, you need to be curious. So if your stakeholders are saying this is an important topic for us, ask why. Why is it an important topic? So you might find that the social element of the ESG story or sustainability is starting to grow in prominence. The climate piece is relatively well understood. Do I need to be an environmental scientist or an engineer? No, but do I need to understand the actions that we take as a business to drive our decarbonisation? Do I need to understand the policies and the approaches and procedures we have in place to drive good social citizenship? Yes, I suppose is the simple answer. But we would have a combination of technical experts within our company who support me, depending on what the stakeholder is looking for. So no, I think you need to just have, I guess, a good business sense. And I think business sense is key. And look, that's just my position, because if you can't translate the ask into what it means for your business, and ideally how the business can benefit by doing it, I think you run the risk of not driving true change. So it's trying to have that understanding of your business or industry, I think, is quite important.
Great. So I know you've been in your role for a couple of years now, as the Chief Sustainability Officer. Can you share with us an initiative that you're particularly proud of that helped drive sustainability forward within your organization? And so that could be within either the last couple of years or even before that, but something that's really stood out to help you be the best on that street.
Yeah. I don't think there's any kind of landmark stuff. There's probably a few things though that come to mind. Certainly, taking on the role, there was that general feeling that we've got this 152-page sustainability report, and while it gets us a lot of credibility from the rating agencies, it's very hard to digest, and it's very hard. It's got a very small audience that can use it and can make it relatable. So we developed a highlights report, which is only 12 pages long, and it's very strong on infographics, simple messaging, big shout outs that ideally, when you look at it, you get that sense that, yeah, this is a sustainable company. It understands where it's got its challenges and it knows what it's doing about it. It understands where it's got its opportunities and it knows what it's doing about it. And then if anybody says, I don't believe it, then you produce the 152-page document and you say, well, there's the detail.
Right.
If you don't believe it, and I think that was it might sound fairly basic and fairly simple, but that was quite important because we see it now when we travel around the business. It's the one document that's on everybody's table. You go into
Right.
reception, it's the document that's on the table. You go into meeting rooms, it's the document that's on the table, because it's just very easy. It's very intuitive. So hopefully it's part of our journey to make sustainability better understood.
Right.
So I think that's one that comes to mind. Then there's a couple of examples, Melina, which I guess I outlined one, which is when you see the output of what you've done. So when you can see a potential opportunity to win an investor or win a customer, and then you actually deliver on it by understanding, well, that number's not right, and then you correct it, and then they go and buy your stock. Like, that's actually quite like anything. It's just, I suppose, you see the results of your efforts coming through.
Right. That makes up for those harder times, the tougher times you were talking about, where it's not as easy. So.
Yes. Well, look, yeah, because in
Yeah.
many instances, the rating agencies will say, well, give me 25,000 euro and I'll help you understand your rating. And you go, well, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
So it is nice when you can do it in a kind of an open manner.
Okay. And how would you suggest like engaging employees who might not have sustainability as part of their role, their title? But you mentioned the importance of collaboration. So how do you engage employees to inspire them to also become a part of the movement and to contribute to a company's sustainability agenda?
Yeah, an excellent question. And again, I would say something that is a work in progress for us. We would have quite an active social media presence, which is both external and internal, in terms of we can see a lot of our internal audience look at it. And the good news there, I guess it's quite simple, the messaging we put out there. So we try and put out proof points. So it's not just, here's Smurfit Kappa, aren't we great? It's like, well, no, we're doing okay, and here's a third party accolade that also agrees. So that and some of them, we were recently named as one of the top 100 in sustainability magazine. So that's kind of a badge of honor where you can say, you look through the list of the companies in that, and you go, wow, these are all household names. Smurfit Kappa is not yet a household name, but our goal is to make Smurfit Kappa a household name. So you can see that energy when people go, well done on that. And you can see that whether it's people on the machines in the factories or chatting to management or senior leadership. So I think areas like that, communications, the part where our goal would be, wouldn't it be amazing if we had 47,000 sustainability ambassadors? So every employee felt competent and capable of engaging with local communities, customers, whoever on sustainability. That's kind of like this lofty goal we have. And next week we're launching our intranet. So an updated intranet. We already have it, but we're updating the intranet, and we have what we call our sustainability knowledge hub, which is trying to demystify sustainability. So it's, to your point, Melina, it's trying to make it more relatable. So we have a section that says, if you're in production, this is how you can contribute to sustainability. If you're in finance, this is how you can contribute to sustainability. If you're in quality, if you're in group head office. So we're trying to say there is no one in our business that can say, I can't contribute to sustainability. Absolutely everybody has their part to play. And then it's trying to make sure that our story is understood, so that they can engage. Let's say they need to go to the local school. How do they engage with local schools on the positives and the negatives of our business? And then if they get a very technical question, usually from a customer or an investor, then we very clearly signpost, contact Garrett or a member of his team, where they can support you in technical requests.
And as you said, Garrett, when you drive sustainable transformation, you really need to get everyone on board. So what is your strategy for, I don't know, getting people from operations on board, or people from finance or from supply chain? because this is is a real challenge and probably something that can truly affect the success of a process of sustainable transformation, right? If you get their
Yeah.
buy-in or not.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're 100% right. And this is where reporting sometimes, in as I say, in the short to medium term, it derails that. But it does come down, like in an ideal world, if we've got investors and customers asking for it, then it kind of takes care of itself. And I guess the good news is that is what's happening. And it is something that's been happening increasingly over recent years. So, our concern was that maybe through COVID, it would not be a priority, and we found the opposite. And that was predominantly investor driven. Then coming out of COVID, with the supply chain shocks around the world, with the inflation environment that we were in, we thought customers would not put a priority on it. And in fact, we found the opposite. Customers are becoming more ambitious, and more demanding. And that's fantastic, because then it's trying to say, well, excellent, you're clearly identifying where you're more ambitious than us. So can I ask you, if we were to reconcile, if we were to hit the same target as you, what would that mean for our relationship? Could we win more business? Could we have a longer contract? So it doesn't have to be pay more. Pay more is one of those options, but there are different ways to work with your partners to drive that change. And I think that's been very encouraging in recent years, with customers really driving it, I should say, in the last, call it 18, 24 months.
And something we learned with these interviews with chief sustainability officers from different industries is that not only the role and the work of the CSO differs from place to place, but also the organization of sustainability teams is very diverse. So can you say something about how your team is organized and who does what?
Yeah, well, we have a very small team, or certainly I think it's small. It's 8 people. It is predominantly focused on reporting, probably with the exception of myself and a colleague who work on communications. Then, outside of the two of us, it's collating the information internally, reviewing it, and then presenting it to the external world. So putting together our sustainability report, engaging with our assurance providers. So that's how we're set up. Now, does that mean that sustainability lives within the 8 of us and that's it? Well, hopefully you get a sense from this interview that it doesn't. Our CEO, our CFO are very, very engaged on this. Our operational CEOs in the Americas and in Europe are being asked by their top customers, where are you on your decarbonization? And so we can see that the demands are there. Our team, as I said, is probably focused on the reporting, but then you will have, call it a sustainability lead in the commercial department, so someone who liaises with customers. Our IR department, so the people who liaise with our investors, would have a fairly strong basic understanding of sustainability, so they don't have to come to me with investor A or investor B has a question. They have their own strong grounding. The same, as I said, for the people in sales. So I think the structure, again, I'm sorry to hide behind it. It really depends on the company, and it depends on where is sustainability for you. For us, I think we still have to do more. Now, what we didn't outline at the start of this call is we're in the middle of a merger with one of our US rivals. So our revenue on completion of the deal will triple. So we'll be a much bigger business. We'll be over 100,000 people. And so the opportunity to drive change, the opportunity to maybe explore and develop a lot of what we've discussed in this call will move to a much bigger scale. So excited by it. Structure will need to be reviewed in light of that question, because we'll have a much bigger business to be looking at, and it will probably involve moving our listing to the New York Stock Exchange. So all of those things create different demands.
That is exciting. It sounds like your team may grow a little bit then in the future.
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about challenges before, challenges facing companies. So when we think about the global challenges facing the world today, how do you feel? Are you optimistic about the future and the role that companies can play to create a better world?
I am, is the simple answer. I think there is the risk that I go back to my moaning place. I think there is the risk that reporting maybe it just postpones the action that's needed. But then the flip side is, how do you make sure the action is happening if you can't trust the reporting? So I get it. But I would be positive. We spoke about net zero commitments back in, I think, 2018, 2019, and there just wasn't a feeling in the company that it was achievable. So we say, look, we know the world is starting to make these commitments, but as a company, we don't make commitments unless we believe we can deliver on them. And I think our understanding of delivering on net zero has dramatically changed in a very short space of time. And so there are technologies that are relatively within reach. There are other technologies which are a little bit further away. But what's quite encouraging is it's not like, give me €1 billion and I'll fix your problem. People are saying, well, no, we can retrofit your existing machinery to use green energy rather than buying a brand new bit of kit. Now, that to me is fantastic, because then it becomes much more practical. And you don't need to worry about these famous stranded assets that they talk about when you're looking at with TCFD. If you say, no, I have a gas boiler, but I'm working on a project with the EU and with NG and Siemens and Centrax and a bunch of universities, and they're working on a project in our mill in France that says you can retrofit an existing gas boiler to process green hydrogen. So you have that limited capital outlay, but you can have your zero carbon energy production. Like, that's fantastic. And that is something which 3 or 4 years ago, you just wouldn't have seen as being an option. Now, it's still not an option today. We're just proving it in a concept. And then the question becomes, well, how far can that go and when will it be available? And that's when you start saying it's probably the end of this decade, start of the next decade, when that should be commercially available. And then we need to figure out, well, where can you get green hydrogen within our network? Because it may only suit, call it, a mill in the northwest of Italy and in the Netherlands, and maybe other parts of our mills it doesn't suit. But that's why it's great that you've got geothermal solutions, you've got heat pump solutions, you've got digital twin solutions, you've got biomass solutions. So there's lots of technology that's just progressing quite quickly. And thankfully, investors and customers who are willing to partner with us to develop those, which is great.
That's great.
Excellent. And one very final question for you, Garrett. I guess we might have people listening who have the kind of ambition to become a chief sustainability officer. So what advice would you give to someone aspiring to become a CSO?
Yeah, good question. I would say stick to an industry that you understand, because that comes back to the business rationale and making sustainability relevant. So if you come from financial services and you have a PhD in being a chief sustainability officer, I would say the worst thing you could do is go into industry, because it's a different industry, it's a different approach, it's different challenges. So I think, having technical capabilities in sustainability is important, but understanding the company you work for, ideally at operational level. Now I'm floating my own boat here because I came from operations, but I think that's important. So you don't necessarily have to have worked for the company, but ideally, do you understand the industry of the company you're going to work for? And if you do, then I think you stand a much better chance of being an effective chief sustainability officer, rather than someone who has a very strong formal education in sustainability, but maybe has no practical experience of the industry they're looking to join. So I'd prefer it's the other way around, that you have that strong industry experience, and then you add sustainability to that, rather than the other way around, because you run the risk of just not, you lose your audience potentially by doing it the other way around.
I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a very good piece of advice.
Yeah.
Garrett, it was a real pleasure to have you in our podcast show, and congratulations for the great work you're doing. And we look forward to discussing where you are soon again.
Yes.
Thanks, Paolo. Thanks, Melina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, we invite you to like and share this episode on your social media. Enjoy the rest of your day.